Well, thank you everyone for attending this NARST webinar on writing a NARST conference proposal review. We really appreciate your service and quick introductions. Neta?
So we're all strand coordinators. I'm Neta from the University of Southampton in the UK. I'm strand 6 co-coordinator.
And I'm Beth Lewis. I'm at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I'm one of the strand coordinators for strand 4.
Hi, everybody. I'm Xiaoming Zhai, assistant professor at the University of Georgia, and I'm a strand coordinator for strand 1. Glad to meet you here.
All right. So we're gonna start. Okay, so what we're gonna do today is go over the process of reviewing NARST proposals, which you haven't submitted yet. You have a few more days until the submission. So I just wanted to say that if you have any questions during the presentation, just feel free to open your mic and ask the question. Or if you want, you can post it in the chat. One of us will monitor the chat. So don't feel like you need to wait until the end. You can ask questions during our talk. All right. So first, I want to go over how the system looks like and what you need to do in order to be a reviewer. So if any of you have been a reviewer in the past or submitted a proposal to NARST before, it might seem a little bit different because we have a new system. It's called the Oxford Abstract System. You got an email asking you to register to the system, so please do that. Now, if you go onto NARST website for the conference in Chicago, you'll see on the left-hand side this bar menu, and you see at the bottom there, you have volunteer to review. So then you click on volunteer to review form, you click it, and then this is what you will see. First of all, you need to select a strand to volunteer to review. So it's possible to select 1 to 3 strands, but we recommend that you only choose one, the one that you're really specialized in, so you can focus on one strand and not try to review for many. So after you choose the strands you're willing to review according to your expertise, you will see this little window asking you how many proposals are you able to review. So here, please be, considerate of your time. Don't say 8 to 12. That's really a lot, of proposal. Try to think of how, realistically, how long it will take you, and write the number that you think you will be able to review. If it's your first time, you might want to do 1 to 3 and not go to the extreme. So you see both of those are, must fill in rubrics. After you fill it in, you'll see the next window. Is this working? Yeah. Okay. So here you need to basically choose keywords or contact areas that relates to your expertise. I think you can do more than 2. I mean, the minimum is 2, but you can do more. So the reason that we ask you to do it is that when we as strand coordinators have the proposal, we need to match the reviewers that can review them. This will help us decide. So if you will not tell us what's your expertise, you risk the fact that you might get something that is completely not in your line of interest or research and you don't know anything about. So please try to fill those in. So this is about the system. Before we go on to actually reviewing, I want to tell you just a few things. So first, when you submit the proposal, the strand coordinators get them. We go over the proposals to see if they're blinded, if they're up to 5 pages and not more, and all of those things according to the guidelines. So when you get the proposal, they should be okay. But we recommend going over it because we're people We're getting hundreds of proposals. We might have missed something. So if you see, for example, that you can recognize the persons that submitted those proposals, you should contact the strand coordinators so you can notify them. And also, in NARST, there's no option to decline the review. So if in journals, they give you the option to accept or decline, there's no such option here at NARST. When you volunteer to review, you are assigned proposals and there's no option to decline. So if you see that you're not able to do something, or you see something that is completely out of the scope of your understanding, you need to email the strand coordinators and let them know, okay? So now we're gonna go over the specific criteria for reviewing.
All right, everybody, thank you, Nat, for introducing the system. Now let's look at the conference presentation format. For NARST, we usually have 5 different formats here: standalone paper, interactive poster, related paper set, and symposium and roundtables. Usually for standalone paper and interactive poster, there are 5 pages. But for related paper set and symposium, usually it can be up to 10 pages. And we have slightly different requirement for the different format. So when you get started to review, you should be aware that some paper or poster might be empirical or non-empirical. For example, people can submit their empirical study with data method thing, but they can also submit some paper like a review paper. Well, when you review the papers, especially for some literature review paper, you should have them slightly differently than empirical paper. And usually need to identify the methodological approach, data sources, and analytical method and the results. But literature review paper can be a little bit flexible about this. And for related paper set, usually it's up to 10 pages and would include multiple abstract in the related paper set. And when you review the paper set, you need to keep in mind and see whether the introduction introduce the frame of the set of studies demonstrated to be coherence. So coherence is very important for paper set. That's why, you know, the organizer put the paper together. And regarding the methodology part, it can be either there is one, paper introduced the whole, the methodology for the whole set of paper set. Also, it can be like for each paper set, they introduce individually about their research methods. It is really up to the paper, the nature of the paper set. And for symposium, which is very similar to paper set, we also require 10 pages, up to 10 pages. Well, for symposium, it may be focused on a topical issue for discussion, but this can also be something not highly research oriented. Okay, for roundtable. So roundtable is a little bit more flexible than the previous format, because this the roundtable usually is developed for, for example, doctoral students to discuss some in progress research. So when you use the criteria, it can be more flexible. Can we go to the next slide? All right. So when you review the papers, the system has already provided you some criteria, and we usually have 5 aspects that you need to rate, and for each aspect, there are three questions corresponding to 3 criteria. So when you review and add your comments, basically you need to address the questions, and based upon the question you addressed, you can read and assign numerical ratings to the different aspect. While you're doing this, and we have some small comment. The first one is, when you write your comments, please explain a little bit about your numerical ratings to the author, and also please make sure to answer yes or no to the criteria question. And also, when you write your review, please make sure your review are respectful and constructive for the authors. So basically, the authors would like to use your review to further improve their study, right? So just to keep in mind all this criteria. All right, I'll hand to Beth.
All right. So thanks. We're going to go ahead and talk about each section in turn. So Neta and I are going to go through. I'm going to talk about the particular focus that you'll be scoring, and then Neta's going to provide you with a poor example, and then I will provide you with a constructive example for each one of these. So we'll go through this by section, but I did just want to point out that in each of these things, you have criteria. So is there a clear focus to the study? And then the second criteria in this subject and problem section is, does the proposal include a clear rationale for the study? And then thirdly, the third criteria for this one would be, does the proposal describe the model, theoretical framework, or philosophy of the study? So these are the pieces that you'll want to focus on. Sometimes it's good to not be too picky about exactly where they occur in the proposal, as long as it comes through at some point in time. Granted, usually people only have 5 or 10 pages, so they have to keep things short. So just, but as you're scanning through and reading, these are good things to look at. So we'll go ahead. Neta, here's your not great example.
So the examples that we're showing you here are from real reviews that we got as, submitters to NARST. And the reason we wanted to give you examples is to also indicate how us as strand coordinators using the review. So when you go into the system, you will have those criteria on the screen, and then you will have a box that you need to write a review, a verbal review, and then you can score it. You need to assign a number from 1 to 5. So at the end, the system will sum up the numbers, and us as strand coordinators will get those numbers, and we need to decide whether or not to accept or reject the submission. Now, it's all very good when the reviewers are in agreement and you get a very high score and it's very clear that you're accepted, or the opposite. But when it comes down to reviewers that are split in their opinions, us as strand coordinators need to go to your verbal comments to see what you wrote that will help us in making this decision. This is one thing that we're using this, verbal comments. The other thing is, as we said before, we are the submitters will get those review and they can adjust their presentations accordingly. So for us, getting something like there's a clear focus, includes a clear rationale, describes the theoretical framework, doesn't really mean much. This is basically copy pasting those 3 questions and just indicating that they appear there and you think that they're okay. I mean, that person scored at 5, which is the highest point, but for us as coordinators, it doesn't give much information to go on. Beth.
Yes, and so you can elaborate upon this. Like, again, this is, you know, it's a nice comment that Neta has here, but it's not very useful, right? So it's nice to know and have some confidence that when you get these comments back from the reviewers, that they've actually read your stuff, right? And that they have a sense for what you're trying to do, and that they can comment on it in a constructive way. So this was a very useful comment that I got on a proposal many years ago, that you know, the topic is very important. There's a lot of professional development available, but how teachers use what they learn is also very important. The author provides a clear diagram of the conceptual framework with an identified theory of teacher change and identity. So this is useful, and had the score been lower, it would have been helpful to know which pieces were strong and which pieces needed a little bit more work. So this is the kind of flavor of elaborating upon a comment, which is not terrible, but again, just adding some extra detail to be more helpful. All right, so then I can pause there, but I'll try to pause at the end of each slide if there are any questions, and feel free, we're monitoring the chat. If you have questions, feel free to do that. You can also just pop in and ask a question as well. The next section is certainly a meatier bit here, if you want to think about it. And again, the distinction is important, right? You want to check and see, you know, am I reviewing an empirical study, or am I looking at a theoretical paper that might be a position paper or a review of literature, because those things are certainly acceptable. And this information should be provided to you within the system, just in case you're not, you're not sure. But people should also be in the habit of kind of identifying these things pretty clearly from the get-go as they go through it. So we're looking for a clear methodology. We're looking for an approach to be identified. We're looking to see if there's a description of the research methods, the context of the study, if it's an empirical study again, and is the methodology and methods design appropriate for the study. And so that's different again than the theoretical piece, which is might perhaps be more grounded in ideological or philosophical positions of the author. And as long as those things are identified and made clear, then people are good to go. So Neta, here's your example for what not to do.
Yes, so I just want to briefly reiterate what Beth said before. Just because NARST chose design or procedure as their, heading for this criteria, just make sure to be like open-minded and accept the fact that people might not use this. So for example, I use methods in my headings, so it doesn't mean that I'm not addressing the design or procedure. I'm just calling it in a different way. So don't be, hung up on words, and try to see if you can see those three criteria throughout the submission. So here we can see an example that a reviewer wrote: there is not enough information and background about this research, and gave it a 2. So this might be true, but you need to remember there's only 5 pages for the submission. And especially in, very elaborate research design like video recording and multimodal analysis and stuff like that, you cannot really explain what's going on. I mean, saying an interview and thematic analysis, most people know, so they can understand it briefly. But if it's more complicated, you cannot expect to have this much detail in a 5 pages proposal. So just keep this in mind. And also you need to be more specific on what is not clear in those sections. And now Beth can give us a more constructive one.
Thanks, Neta. So I pulled this from a paper set just to give us a different example to so in this particular one, they're saying each study includes a very clear description of how the data was collected and analyze. So that's useful again when you're doing a paper set versus a solo paper or poster. But obviously you want to be careful and make sure that you're attending to the format again. But this was a helpful comment. So even though this scored highly, this section on the criteria, they still the reviewer provided these couple questions, which was really useful. So thinking about, across studies and the classroom data, how are the lessons selected for observation? Were they randomly selected, or did teachers submit them, or did teachers know that researchers would be coming that day? And, we're always, usually sort of pressed for space in a proposal, and you might not have had, a chance to talk about those things. But as a reviewer, it's great to just sort of remind people, oh yeah, this sounds really fabulous, but when you're putting together their presentation, here's some friendly reminders about information that will be, conference attendees will be very interested to see as well. And this certainly lends credibility to studies and whatnot. So these are good things to offer up to people when you're reviewing their work. Any questions about this particular section? All right, fantastic. And we'll have time to answer some questions at the end too. So we're happy to wait for those. All right. The next piece, again, is more on the analysis and the findings. So there should be a pretty good, in an empirical study, there should be a good description of the data and how they were collected and just the general scope of all of that. But then we also really, in an empirical study, we're going to want to see that there have been appropriate data analyses that have been done. Are the arguments, are the interpretations well supported and linked to the prior literature? Does the proposal discuss alternative interpretations, any sort of sources of bias or reliability or validity as appropriate, depending upon whether it's a quant or qual study? And then in theoretical papers, we certainly want to see, is there a synthesis of ideas that are appropriate and coherent? But again, parallel to the empirical study, are the arguments logical? Are they supported by evidence? It's not, make sure people aren't reaching, right? Overreaching. And then certainly, is there a discussion of alternative interpretations or counter arguments in this case? So, so that's kind of the general scope here. Again, we're being careful to attend to the kind of proposal that it is. And Neta.
All right. So surprisingly, we've seen this multiple times when people just answer yes or no for those questions. Please don't do it. This is not helpful to anyone, not for us and not for the submitters that get this. So yes, when we get this, and also 3 is very, the scoring is very neutral. It's basically from 1 to 5, it's the middle. So you don't really understand what the reviewer is trying to say with this review, because it's basically in the middle, and you cannot assess if he or she thinks it's good or not. And us as strand coordinators will need to go back to the proposal to see what is actually going on there. So now our more helpful comment.
So here's one that only got a 4. But that does tell us as strand coordinators that it is a positive review. And so that's good information to have, but then they back it up, right? So they say there's good use of specific examples. This was a qualitative study. There's a good use of specific examples of each teacher in the results. The reader is led to believe that Kathy is the better teacher and transitions better than David after attending the professional development. And then the reviewer poses these really helpful questions. How do we know David isn't successful as well, and that they just have differing viewpoints? It would be interesting to have some additional data, perhaps some student data, to show Kathy's transitions are indeed working towards the goal of the professional development. So this is excellent food for thought, and it helps one as a submitter to think about, okay, yeah, these are good questions, and these are things I could expect to have to respond to in a presentation. It might be good to kind of get ahead of that so that you can move the conversation forward at the conference. But it's especially useful, as Neta is saying, to us as strand coordinators to say, oh yeah, this reviewer is really read carefully. They've thought about what was in the proposal, and they're offering back some really great feedback. Okay, contribution. So contribution, we really want to encourage people to think broadly on this as much as possible. It's not necessarily going to be exactly what we ourselves might see as being a valuable contribution, because we all have our areas of expertise, but we want to think you know, broadly to the field, and think about, okay, do the conclusions as they've been presented add to or refine or refute some theoretical constructs? Do they contribute some insights and implications for the field? And finally, the criteria, the third criteria in this particular one, attends to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so this is an important focus, certainly in the field. And some people's work will relate very directly to these spaces. And some people's work might be slightly adjacent or maybe not quite as direct, and that's okay. So be generous, we think, we would recommend, and we have a couple examples here to share with you. Neta.
So this is an example of something that I got. This research adds nothing new to the field. Everything is already reported and there is no implications. It doesn't address the conference theme or any of the organization goals. So first of all, you can see that it's not very constructive. This is a very negative feedback, although it scored 4. And this is something that we come across a lot when we look at the reviews, that the reviewers try focusing on the negative when they're writing the review, but then they're giving it a high score. So this makes us confused as, you know, coordinators that read this. It might mean that you actually think it's good, but you're focusing on the negative and writing what's not good in your, you know, verbal comments that we encourage you not to do. Try to give, you know, constructive feedback, but also try to think about the submitters behind those, you know, proposals that will get this review and will think that the research basically worth nothing. So try to be careful with the words that you are choosing. Try to be more constructive, as Beth will show us.
Yeah, and we want to be encouraging to our colleagues. I mean, how would we feel if we received a comment like this? This is, and especially considering that we also are trying to mentor people who are coming up in the field, and so graduate students, this is not a helpful sort of comment to provide to people who might be new early career researchers. It's not a helpful thing. So this is also a 4. This was one that we got on our paper set, and it was the conclusions add to our understanding of teacher development in the induction years and have valuable implications for science teacher education and professional development. The proposal does not address equity issues. So here's a mix, right? So here's some nice things about the proposal that are being valued by the reviewer, which is very nice feedback, but then also points out, like, you haven't explicitly connected to equity issues, even though one could make the argument that having access to good teachers is also an equity issue. So, you know, there are improvements to be made. There are things to be said more explicitly in the presentation. And so this kind of feedback does help presenters to be thinking about, okay, how do I need to refocus a little bit and maybe be more explicit in the things that might connect to equity and diversity and inclusion in this particular instance. So, all right, I think we have.
I just want to.
Oh, go ahead.
reinforce something, that we are not saying that you should be the nicest person on earth and just accept all the proposals. I mean, I think 25 or 30% of the proposals are rejected. It doesn't mean that you need to accept them. It just means that you need to be, first of all, respectful. Think about the words that you're saying. And if you're saying something, try to back it up with, more evidence of, what you're saying, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Neta. Okay. Again, just a reminder about cohesiveness. This is going to be just for the related paper sets only, and you'll be able to tell again in the proposal formats, just to double check that you are, you're starting to read something that's 10 pages long. Just double check to see, which format you're doing. But cohesiveness, again, is really important in a paper set, because a paper set's going to occupy a whole session. And so, as strand coordinators, we really need to know if this is going to work or not, or if it just feels like things have been thrown together without a particular design in mind. And so you definitely want to make sure that all the papers in the set are focused on a similar concept or theme. And we do certainly want to see people trying to push the field forward. Is there new information? Is it a good case study that provides us with some new insights? We want to see things being articulated in each one of the papers that build towards a strong presentation. And so again, we want to see high quality information and a rigorous and comprehensive understanding of the theme that they have picked. So the proposers are going to be should be really clear on what it is that they're focusing in on. Neta?
All right, so here again, as you can see, this scored 1, and it's saying there's 5 papers in the set. The 4th is well connected, and the 1st is not. That is not helpful. I think they kind of got the gist of what's helpful and what's not. So, Beth.
Yeah, this one is certainly, again, just it's just a little bit more detail. And again, the reviewer has taken the trouble to look and comment on each paper, but also has looked at the theme of teacher self-efficacy and say that each paper is contributing new information and a different view. Papers are high enough quality to be accepted individually, with more support and further elaboration of findings. So again, they're kind of encouraging people to, the authors of this proposal, when, if this gets accepted, that they should include a bit more. And so it has again, a higher rating, which seems merited. And as a strand coordinator, we would be looking for this kind of information to help us make our decisions. Okay. General interest, and this one is fairly self-explanatory, but just in terms of thinking about how, the content of the presentation and the way it's going to be presented, does it seem like it will be meaningful and useful and of interest to the community at large? And that's the key piece here, is that the community at large. So again, beyond ourselves, beyond our own particular interests, we want to make sure that we are encouraging a broad range of proposals here. And so, Neta?
Yes, so in this one, this is the most kind of subjective rubric criteria from all of them, because you cannot find really, evidence to this. You need to assess it. If you think it's going to be, interesting and important to the strand members, all of NARST member, or the educational community. Strand 6 is the informal learning environment, which the co-coordinator. So it's a very, narrow field. I do research on science museums, usually one science museum at the time. And it's what we're trying to see from, reviewers, trying to think about not only, themselves and telling people that this research is only about one science museum in one country, therefore it's not really interesting. So you need to consider that, well, some people do think that learning in science museum is interesting and important, and try to, again, think about, the broad community and the broad, educational field, and what can we learn from this kind of research. And well, yeah, think about it this way, basically.
Yeah. And so again, just trying to think again, thinking critically. I mean, there have certainly been proposals for things that are so far afield that, you can be pretty sure that the NARST community is like, no, that's not it. And any kind of like commercial, like trying to sell things, like this is completely inappropriate. Like that should not be something that belongs in the vendor part of our conference and not in these presentation spaces, right? So just be on alert for that. Like once in a blue moon, you might get something that's people are trying to sell their products, and that's not right. But here's a very generous and thoughtful comment, in the way that this particular reviewer phrases. So, content of the presentation promises to be of general interest to the NARST members concerned with teacher education and professional development. So they were very careful to parameterize it. And this happened to be part of a strand that had to do with teacher professional development. So it was appropriate, this works. And so this is very good information for us, again, the strand coordinators, to know like, oh yeah, we've got this particular paper, which has been rated highly, we've got it in the right place. And so that we know that when we organize the sessions, that when people show up, they're going to be like, oh yeah, this is definitely a talk I want to see. So again, these are helpful comments. They're helpful to the people who write it, who give them a sense that their work is going to be valued. It gives them some feedback in order to be able to include more information at the presentation. And it's really helpful for us as strand coordinators to be able to organize the conference in the best way possible. So.
All right. Thank you for Beth and Nat presented good examples here. I hope everybody here can have a better sense of how to write the review for the authors. I think it's very important when we write the comments, just think about if we as author, most of us probably also are authors, submit a proposal to NARST, and what kind of comments we would like to receive, right? We would like to receive comments really show respectful, right? And also the comments are useful for us to improve our proposal. Even we got rejected, while the comments are still useful and valuable for us to improve our work. And in order to do that, we would like to have some comments provide sufficient details, and that's something we need to consider. And one thing we want to give a tip here is, especially for some like a paper session or something, it's better for us to go through the entire paper set before we assign the ratings. So keep in mind, your rating really matters. If you assign a 1, which indicate that you do not recommend this proposal, and if you assign 5, that's highly recommended, which will impact our decision as the coordinator or the strand. Well, next, I wanted to briefly re-emphasize some timeline. Beth, can you? Yeah, okay, thank you. So as you all know, that NARST proposal submission deadline is August 15, next week, right? So for reviewers, you will expect to receive some assignment by September 11th, and you will expect to you will need to complete your reviews by September 30. And if you have any question during this period, you are free to reach out to the strat coordinators. And we're going to, as the coordinator, we're going to have like 4 to 5 days to summarize all the reviews and make our decisions and recommendations. The authors would be able to receive their the final decision from NARST around October 18. Well, this is all the information we provided. If you have any questions, now we are very glad to take any questions.
Oh, thank you, Beth, for stop sharing. I just want to make another quick point because I think we didn't write it. So when you finish writing the reviews and rank each criteria separately, you will be asked whether you recommend to reject or accept the proposal. So just make sure that you go over what you wrote and try to sum up the numbers for yourself to make sure that you didn't, everything until you got into the contribution and it's really bad, so you decided to reject it, but overall you give it a high score. So make sure that you are consistent within your review and then make the decision accordingly. Well, sometimes you need to go and readjust what you wrote before, or even if you have multiple proposals and you want to, try to see that you are being consistent. So it's like, just keep this in mind that you need to be kind of, consistent with your recommendation to the strand coordinators.
Yeah, great. So what questions do people have? Again, we know that some people weren't able to make the webinar today, and that's fine. We are recording, and so we will share the recording out. But we're happy, we have some time. We allotted an hour for this session, so we have time for your questions and we'd be happy to answer them. Any tips from other experienced reviewers? Okay. Well, we really appreciate your service to NARST, and we couldn't obviously do all this work without great reviewers, and so we really appreciate you taking the time to attend the webinar, and don't hesitate to reach out to your strand coordinators. We all have to work together as a team to get this done, and we want it to be a great conference in Chicago in the spring. So thank you so much for coming, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you, everybody.